I mean, in all honesty, I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on philosophy. What you think about it?
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So,
I
the
figured.
usual.
Mm-hmm. The usual.
What the fuck is he doing, Millions? What am I getting roped into?
Nothing. Just a thought experiment. So answer the question honestly. What's your opinion on
Okay.
philosophy?
I mean, interesting. It's nice, like, mental gymnastics is the wrong way to put it, but I don't know. It's intellectually stimulating.
Okay. So, if you had to pick between, let's go ahead. Let's say science, religion, and philosophy. What do you think are the major strengths and weaknesses of the three?
So you gotta wrap this into persona somehow?
No, I'm just curious on what you want to think or what you want to say.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like science is explaining the natural world, religion, depending on how you define it, explains the spirit, and then philosophy is kind of like a middle ground between the two.
I get you. I don't know. I kind of look at philosophy as kind of like the weird middle child between religion and science.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because think about it. Back in the day, religion was pretty much purely built to explain the unexplainable.
Mm-hmm.
Why did the sun rise every day? Because a scarab dragged it across the sky. Why
But at the same time, scientists used to be natural philosophers, so
I mean,
It
a
has
lot
a
of
hand in
science
both.
got birthed from philosophy. And back
Yeah.
then, philosophy was basically just science.
Mhm.
And the way I like to look at it is philosophy is science without the knowledge, or without the exact knowledge. There's still a desire to find an answer, but you're not going to extreme lengths to find the answer. Because a lot of the time what you're contemplating is not something that can be answered.
Yeah.
Ridiculously easy. You know? Like, we don't philosophize on why the sun rises every morning nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of people philosophize about now is, life, purpose, what it means to be happy, things like that.
I don't know if this is y'all's opinion, but like that's why I don't discuss like this sim. I know it's trendy to talk about, whether we're in a simulation or not, but I don't see that as science. I see that as philosophy because there's no way to like prove or disprove. There's no arguability to it just because you can either say no, computers can't get that complex, or computers can get infinitely complex. There's no middle ground. So,
And we won't really know whether or not computers can actually get that complex until we build computers that complex. And by then, if this
Well, no.
if this truly was a simulation, that would make us the gods of a new simulation. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think philosophy is just a great way to think about the unexplainable. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people don't really tap into philosophy too much. Like, take Crimson, for example. Crimson hates philosophy. But Crimson
I could totally see it.
Crimson is also the kind of person that likes having the answer to stuff, not having an interpretation of the answer.
Hence why he does a lot better in a courtroom than, being an armchair philosopher.
And, I mean, don't get me wrong, he is a good guy, and he's a decent guy for what he does, but...
Oh, yeah.
Like, I honestly think if you don't at least have some ability to entertain philosophy to an extent, then you're kind of missing out on a couple of things.
See, like, in the case of Crimson and people like him, they're intelligent, but they're not curious.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily
that's how I
say
say it, at
that, because they have enough curiosity to pursue knowledge,
Yeah.
but they're curious about answers.
Yeah.
They're not curious about what ifs. They search for definite ends rather than
They
trying
stop
to
at the abstract.
Mhm. It's like it's like different kinds of painters. You have people like I almost said Mozart. No, that's not a painter, Katie's. You have
yes, Mozart and the Starry Night.
mhm. Well, I mean that's what I'm saying. Is like you have painters like what's his name, Da Vinci. People who paint all these super like intricate and detailed fine pieces of art. And then you have people like Van Gogh, who paint these kind of abstract and indiscernible kind of art pieces. Both of them are artists in their own respects, but they focus on different kinds. And there's people like Crimson, who pursues the fine art, the things that have the hard lines and the fine endings, and the details. And then there's people like myself and Millions, who are the Van Goghs. Granted, I still have both ears. But we like to think a lot about the abstract, and we don't really like having hard lines in our research. Isn't that right, Millions?
Definitely.
Turn your mic up a bit, you're kind of quiet.
Oh, okay. I don't think I could do that, actually. You can?
You can mess around with it in Discord settings, I believe. You can turn your mic up to like 50
settings.
or 100% and 200% if you like. I think if you right-click yourself.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Or I guess I could turn you up.
I don't know. I can hear you 5 millions.
Oh, okay.
I also love that Jay implies you only have one ear.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. So, in the terms of philosophy, Dio, do you think philosophy is better to have, or is better whenever it actually does have a finite end to it? Or no, let me rephrase that. Do you think that something stops being philosophy once they figure out the answer to it? Or does it continue being philosophy? Like, let's take death, for example. A lot of people will say, there's nothing beyond death, or death is, the end-all, be-all. Some people say that there's something beyond death, delving a little bit into religion, but not in depth, or there's no real way of hard proving it. If we actually did find out what lies beyond death, would it still be considered philosophy?
Yes, because it's almost like even if there is an answer at the end of whatever debate, it's almost like as we keep saying, like science is the exact definition of something. Philosophy takes it a step back and argues under different lenses of perception. Is the way I'd like to put it.
So what you're saying is that science would be the equivalent of taking light and putting it straight through a prism, whereas philosophy would be putting that light in the corner and watching all of the colors fade in.
Well, to take your analogy of like, if we know what happens after death, the scientists will say, okay, after death, you just rot away. While a philosopher, or say a group of philosophers, is going to take that as the pessimist will say, oh, this is the end of suffering. The optimist will say, oh, this, I don't know, what could be optimistic about death? It's a release from pain, I guess you could say, but, there's going to be different lenses of perception on what that means and how it's significant to a conscious being.
Okay. So, do you think that there has to be a point behind the items you philosophize about, or do you think that merely being able to merely being able to think about it is all that's really needed to be there?
Well,
Should you actively look for an answer to a philosophical question, or should you just entertain the idea?
I think entertaining the idea is enough. Actual answers, like we keep saying, are left to the scientists.
What do you think, Millions?
Okay, when it comes to philosophy, it's all about. Okay, let's start. It's all about gaining knowledge, reality and existence and all this. And it's mostly considered academic. So, whenever you want to gain any knowledge or question something, you can find an answer to it, and it can be your own perspective things. Let's take a philosophical zombie. You know what that is?
I'm familiar with the term, but it's been a few years. Refresh my memory.
Yeah.
It's basically, basically everyone you think is basically a zombie. That you're alive. But you don't know like other people's lives. They're kind of like zombies. You're kind of different.
So it's kind of the concept that you can only know that you are conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That philosophy. Yeah, that's a thing in philosophy that, if I'm correct, it was Churchland. That's his last name. Who coined that term.
I thought it was Churchill. No. But nah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
And then there's like, let's see, I forget his name. Davies? No, not Davies. I think he wrote Rawls. There's Rawls too. For an example, one philosophy is the original position, which I forgot what the hell that meant. Literally, just now. And even though I knew about it, it's all. But when it comes to Rawls, it's all about the veil of ignorance. How you basically need to put yourself in a certain situation, but you know some things, but you don't know other things of that situation. Let's say you go to Mars, but you don't know what you're going to be when you get to Mars. Let's say maybe there's people that will be builders, people that will be scientists, administrators, all this.
Martians.
Oh, they could be fun. Well, eventually you could have Martians if they're born there. But you won't know, which is kind of hidden behind this veil until you're there. But you're kind of getting into this whole hypothetical situation, to this created society and like Mars. So there's a lot of things that be like that, like there's philosophical zombie, even just like even the days of soccer. That just it goes. This whole idea of philosophy just goes for thousands of years, and just gaining knowledge, just learning about yourself. Let's say the Cartesian method, I guess, where a lot of back in the day, if I remember correct, he was an African American, and basically, you know that everything around you is real because of how you were brought into society. Back in the day, how African Americans had it between oppressor and oppressed. You kind of question yourself because of being oppressed, I think, if I'm correct. While you know that what you see out there is correct. While, let's say, Descartes was the opposite, sort of in a way, where you are, well, you know, you're real. I am solar, or I exist, or something like that. You know.
I think therefore I am.
I think therefore I am. Yeah. That was Descartes. And then, you know, everything is kind of more like questionable. If everything else exists, but you know that you do. And Descartes. Well, actually, that's a Cartesian method. Never mind, I got Cartesian and the other method mixed up. Yeah, that's Cartesian method right there. My bad. Descartes.
Oh, you're
Cartesian.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was Mills who coined the other term. Where just like, or I guess it's called the non-Cartesian method, basically. The non-Cartesian self. Where you question yourself, but everything else you don't, in a way.
Like the
Because-
entire world is definite, but you yourself are indefinite.
Maybe, but that might be it. But I'm not sure. But you know, philosophy just takes all these different things. It's just all perspectives of life, even from like feminine ethics as well. It's just, it does a lot of things. It doesn't stay on one subject, but a lot of it is about your own existence and existence of everything else. That's how philosophy is a lot of that.
And I think a very easy way of expressing the three different states of quote-unquote education, religion, philosophy, and science is science is the body. That would make religion the soul, and philosophy the mind. Because the mind questions itself constantly, judges and bases all of its actions on what the body, or on how the body thinks and reacts. It doesn't, like, the mind itself doesn't necessarily, or you yourself don't necessarily know how all of your bodily functions work. You just know they work. And you use them to the way, or in the ways that you can. But that doesn't mean you can't come up with new and creative ways to use your body, despite not knowing exactly how, say, the nervous system or your muscles work. You know? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I do that. I do like that allegory just because of the fact that, like, my favorite thing is whenever people, like, preach that science is the be-all, end-all, which I am, like, all for, you know, having a scientific culture. But it's also, like, I don't know, it's refreshing whenever philosophers are actually taking on teams. Like, have y'all ever heard of Alan Watts and his talks and everything? Well,
I don't think so. I just want to look them up actually.
he particularly leaned towards Zen Buddhism back in like the 50s and 60s and everything. And, but, you know, he wouldn't like, he wasn't trying to convert everybody to Buddhism, but he would take that philosophy and put it into plain speech for like Western cultures. And since he had, you know, especially for the 50s and 60s, the kind of abstract view of Zen Buddhism, you know, a lot of scientific teams would actually take him onto like psychological case studies, a lot of pharmaceutical stuff, and actually like ask him what his opinion was on it and, you know, such, because he was such a, you know, diverse philosopher, I guess you could say. So I kind of lost my train of thought of where I was going with that, but I don't know. It's just refreshing whenever that actually happens and people don't just dedicate 100% to science.
And I think my biggest issue with that is the fact that people try treating all three as a form of competition. Because in all actuality, like, they're not in competition. They're just different stages of the same kind of intelligence, you know? Religion is finding out how to give yourself peace of mind. If you can't believe, or if you can't keep yourself motivated enough by yourself, you trust in a higher power to ease your mind. Science is the experimentation and the study of the world around you and the way that it works. And then philosophy is the study, or is the thought of existence itself, in essence. Just to boil it down. And you can't really compare thinking about existence to defining how the world works. It's like comparing apples to oranges. They're both fruit, but that's about all they have in common on the surface level. And it does kind of annoy me whenever people start talking about how science is better than philosophy because it does this, that, and the other, and then other people will turn around and say, no, religion is better than science because it does this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, they're not. No one facet of this is any better than the other. They're all because they're too different to really define, or they're too different to compare. In my opinion, anyways. What do you think, James?
When it comes to all three, this is the thing though. When you philosophize and use science, you have to actually critically think. But when it comes to religion, though, you don't have to. You just accept things because
blind faith.
Blind faith of a god, something. You just accept them. But when you're in philosophy, you question things. While in science, you question them, you try to experiment with them, and then eventually it could be made into a theory or at least some kind of law in that theory. Like theory of evolution, theory of gravity, germ theory, music theory, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But do you not have agency to take on that faith, though?
Well, I think what Millions is trying to get at is the fact that religion doesn't really change. It's a lot of memorization and a lot of... Basically, religion hasn't changed in the past, over 1,000 years by now? We all know all of the stories of most Christianity and Judeo-Christianism. But...
They take from each other and all that stuff. Religion's been a thing for actually maybe 20,000 years.
Mm-hmm. And
something like that.
I don't see religion as something that basically teaches you to accept. I think what religion is it's a way to give peace of mind to those who can't find it for themselves. It's not necessarily about learning anything new. It's about learning how to control yourself. Best example I can give is why do heaven and hell exist? The reason why heaven and hell exist in religion is purely and simply because they needed people to believe that there were consequences for their actions that they would not be able to immediately see. So religion isn't necessarily this end-all be-all of memorizing facts. It's learning how to be a decent human being. Now, I'm not saying every religion specifically teaches that. Some people
they're still televangelists.
Well, it's the practice. It's the whole. It actually, honestly, it bleeds into science. In all honesty, because it's like you can give someone all of the information on how to make a light bulb and the science behind it, and the same person who created a light bulb eventually went on to create the hydrogen bomb, if I remember correctly. Not the exact same guy, but that science led to that. So it's
eventually led to that. Yeah.
The information that you're handed, once it goes into the hands of the user, is up to them on how to interpret it. Like the Crusades. Do what?
Or expand on it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, yeah.
And some people expand on it for the better, some people expand on it for the worse. It's like Christianity. Back then, everybody can agree the Crusades weren't exactly the best thing.
Nowadays, back in those days, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But back in the day, that was probably like the worst form of radical religion they had back then. No, and I'm pretty sure not every Christian sect was like that, but it's the one we hear about. And then you hear about these people like everybody loves can't say that. Everybody loves to knock on the Westboro Baptist Church. But at the same time, they're just one small segment of the Baptist faith. Not all of them are bad, but someone took that belief and that religion and that lifestyle and used it for their own purposes, bent it to their will. And as gruesome as those examples are, it defines exactly what religion is. Religion is all about interpretation. Being handed the rule books to life and using those rules to define your life. And even though the rules haven't changed in 2,000 years or however long it's been, there's still the solid rules themselves are still solid rules. It's just the people who take them don't always use them for the right purposes.
I can roll with that.
Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that I'm not an advocate for religion. I believe that it is only religion's only use is for the people that need it. You know, the people that aren't able. Well, I can't say aren't able to, but don't want to think for themselves. Want the people that want to follow another or follow someone else, but don't have anyone to follow. Those who have that mindset follow religion.
As well as people who, just want community. There's a lot of people who left religion that kind of miss the whole idea of community. Mm-hmm. But because they left, they miss it. But, yeah, that's one aspect of it too. A lot of people just like community. And religion provides that.
I think that bleeds into this, like, there's imperfect members of every branch that we're talking about, because there's, scientists that just chase the fame and chase the grants and, just go into it for Nobel Prizes. While at the same time, there's religious people that go into it just, so that they can rub their nose at anybody that, acts differently than them.
Well, in all honesty, I wouldn't necessarily say that chasing Nobel Prizes is for fame, or going into science for fame and money isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if you win Nobel Prizes, that means that you did something good. I think the harder form of science is whenever you start going into stuff that is morally or ethically wrong. It's like the lobotomies from way back in the day. They were highly controversial, even back then, but they were the only method that anybody knew. So they kept doing them until someone said, hey, you can't just take an ice pick and give someone an abrasion on their brain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a touchy subject with science, because a lot of science is reliant on, ironically enough, a lot of the worst parts of science are related to the morals and the sense of self, which is something that philosophy likes to devil a lot into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think my favorite example of that is, what's his name? Was it Eisenhower? No, it wasn't Eisenhower. It was the guy
Edison?
No, it wasn't Edison. It was the guy who created the atom bomb.
Einstein.
No, it wasn't Einstein.
He helped. He was part of the project.
But the guy who originally made the bombs, they did an interview on him back in the day, and the video footage. Oppenheimer, yeah, that's what it is.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, they did an interview with him, and in the moment, he believed what he was doing was good. But after seeing the aftermath of exactly the kind of devastation it caused, you can see in the interview exactly how much he regretted what he did.
Oh yeah.
The Oppenheimer review or interview should be on YouTube or whatever. I highly recommend checking it out.
What did you say?
I have become Death, the Destroyer of Worlds.
Yep, that's it.
Let's see. It was. We knew the world would not be the same. Few people left. Few people cried. Most people remained silent. I remember the line from the Hindu scripture, the book of Gita, I believe?
Yeah.
Vishnu was trying to persuade the prince that he was, to fulfill his duty and to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I have become death, destroyer of worlds." And his last words in that interview were, "I suppose we all thought that one way or another." But yeah, the darker side of science is usually, is a lot more dangerous because you won't know you've crossed that line until you've actually gone across it. But without... Go ahead.
But nowadays, I think even scientists can at least give a prediction of what could happen, whatever they do create, as well. So, back in the day, maybe there's things that they didn't know that did happen, but I think not since we just been in science more, there's more science that we are able to basically predict anything that we invent. But we're still not perfect, though, of course.
I don't know, man. Like, in all honesty, right now, what we think right now is, or what we think of right now is safe and doesn't pose much problem, could pose problems in the future that we just don't see yet. You know?
Right.
And I mean, another perfect example of that is cigarettes. Way back in the day, nobody really bothered doing any kind of experimentation on it, or, actually, no. Better than that, a much better example of that is lead-based paint.
Oh, yeah.
I did an entire study on that during my my shell tech training, and back then, nobody thought lead was that much of an issue. Nobody really thought about it because it was used in everything. And then after they started doing some studies, they found out that, yeah, lead is actually horrible for the human body and has some very detrimental physical and mental effects on you if you have prolonged uses or prolonged exposure to it, especially if you started being exposed to it as a child.
Real quick, Jay. Do you care if Tass hops in?
Yeah, we've hit that 30-minute mark, so we can probably... What do you think, Millions? Are we good to quit here, or do you want to keep talking?
Yeah, we're good to quit. I think I've got some good material.
Alright.